Invisible No More. Voices of Intersectional Asian American and Pacific Islander AAPI community. Kavita Papela, President, California Association of the Deaf.
Hello, everyone. This month of May is a time to celebrate Asian Pacific Islanders. By celebrating in the future, in the present, and in the past, we are breaking down multiple barriers and removing that force of habit to overlook and disregard. But how do we do this, you may ask? We need to listen to those sharing their experiences in an open mind and an open heart. This open dialogue, it's going to help us reveal and dissect internalized anti-Asian sentiments in the community. And as we work to recover from this, bravery is needed and a crucial awareness about this topic. Here are some stories.
Kimberly Hahn, Vice President, Southern California Asian Deaf Association.
Imagine you're a young girl playing at Disneyland. And as you're playing, you accidentally bump into a woman in a wheelchair, and that woman yells at you, and your own mom yells at you. The girl's confused, and that girl was me. Growing up, I didn't understand why I was so different from everyone, why I tripped often, why I couldn't see much, and why I couldn't see in the dark and had to be guided by someone. Plus, as an Asian person, people misunderstood me because naturally I didn't show much expression. They thought I was stuck up and ignoring them on purpose, but the truth was I couldn't see. My parents suspected something was wrong when I was learning how to walk. It seemed I was delayed in my development, I struggled, and I tripped a lot. They did several tests and found the answer when I hit puberty. I was born with Usher syndrome. This includes blindness, complete deafness, and tunnel vision. Also, a lack of balance. Did the answer help? No. I couldn't find anyone to relate to me, a deaf-blind Asian. The hearing and the deaf communities both looked at me and doubted that I was really a deaf-blind Asian. When I would text and use my cane at the same time, they would look at me with confusion and say, "That can't be." They would ask, "How much can you see?" I remember 2 years ago I went to New York, out with new and old friends, to a restaurant. The terrain was a little bumpy, and I didn't have a cane at the time. I had to be very careful with how I was walking. One person approached me and asked me, "Why are you so quiet?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to be careful so I don't fall." He said, "Are you antisocial?" I said, "No, I'm deaf and blind," and I had to explain it to him. He said, "Well, don't be so negative. Be positive. Someday your vision will improve." That offended me deeply, because I was born with it. I had already accepted myself. But that person did not accept me for who I was. Invisible no more. My voice matters. I'm very lucky to have a wonderful support system of friends and family that encouraged me to join sports and clubs. When I got into grad school, I met my first deaf-blind friend. She was my classmate and my roommate. In that moment, I fell deep into the deaf-blind world. I learned about my identity, a new culture, a new language. When I graduated, I left for Korea, and there I finally met someone like me, deaf, blind, and Korean. I remember we communicated using Universal Sign Language, Korean Sign Language, American Sign Language, and Protactile. I remember a heartfelt moment, sharing advice with them on how they can open up to their friends and family and coworkers about making their environment more accessible for them. In that moment, I realized that the deaf-blind Asian community deserves to be recognized, and their culture and language needs to be recognized too.
Priscilla Young, Senior Program Manager, Society for the Blind.
Invisible. That is often how I feel when I am overlooked by all those around me. An Asian woman who identifies with being blind. All you see is me with my long white cane, and a flurry of assumptions flood your minds, and the gap between us widen. I can hear your footsteps and your whispers as you walk by, talking amongst yourselves. I can hear you crossing the street to avoid me. Invisible is how I feel when the server speaks to my husband about what I would want to order off of the menu, instead of asking me. Invisible is how I feel when at the hospital I am drilled a million questions by the hospital social worker about how I, as a blind mom, could take care of my own baby, instead of having a conversation with me about how all moms are starting fresh into motherhood with an array of possibilities. The world assumes that I cannot participate because of my blindness. The world assumes that as an Asian woman, I do not have the confidence to speak up for myself, when really the truth is, nobody stops to ask me and to listen beyond their own assumptions and misconceptions. If you would pause and stop and listen to my story, you would hear a tale of advocacy and hope for acceptance. And I would do the same for you. We would take turns listening to each other's stories. For when we truly listen to each other and hear each other, we can start to see each other as fellow human beings. We can be visible beyond the categories that define us and break down the walls that separate us. We can be seen, we can be heard, and we can begin to understand. Now, I teach those who are blind how to use the long white cane and to travel safely in this world so that we can be visible. Invisible no more. My voice matters.
Sharon Go, Membership Director, California Association of the Deaf. Founder, Southern California Asian Deaf Association.
Does being a deaf person matter? Does being an Asian person matter? When I was 3 years old, I entered a classroom on the very first day, and I saw the students sitting at their desks, and was very excited because they were deaf like me. I was glad to find my own people, but I was wrong. When they turned to look at me, they stared at me as if I were an alien, because they had never seen an Asian person before. One student even mocked me and mocked my features. I was shocked and heartbroken. I thought, but I'm deaf like you. I became afraid to go to school every day. Unfortunately, I didn't fit into the deaf community. But even worse, I didn't fit in to the Asian community. I'll tell you another story. My cousin invited me to church where there were many Asian people there. I thought and I hoped that I could make a few friends, because they were Asian like me. I went to the church, excited to see so many Asian people. My cousin introduced me to her new friends, and they seemed friendly, and I felt safe. But that didn't happen. When they approached us, they began to talk, and I couldn't understand them. My cousin told them, "Oh, she's deaf." And they reacted with disapproval. They quickly left us. And I thought, but I'm Asian like you. We're the same. As an Asian person, I cannot separate my deafness. And as a deaf person, I cannot separate my Asianness. Why can't you accept me as both an Asian and a deaf person? Invisible no more. My voice matters. I met several Asian deaf friends in college, and we learned that we shared similar feelings and experiences in our past. We decided to establish the Southern California Asian Deaf Association, SCADA, in 1999. Over 20 years, more Asian deaf people from around the world have the opportunity to feel pride in who they are and know that our voice truly matters.
Raymond Kwong, Advocate, Advocacy, and Community Engagement, Disability Rights, California.
My family and I came to the US when I was 11 years old. Both my sister and I are visually impaired, and going through the special education system was difficult. With our very limited English speaking skills and not knowing what services we can ask for and what services are available out there, we were invisible. When I was in high school, my parents encouraged both my sister and I to pursue higher education, and they provide us with all the support that we need. However, not all AAPIs with disabilities have everything they need, have the support they need to go into higher education. I remember there was a Chinese American student who was also visually impaired. He was having a very difficult time in school. His parents were not very involved and didn't really want to accept that he might need additional services in order for him to succeed. Invisible no more, our voice matters. I started a support group to help guide high school students through their transition process. I'm a part of the Asian and Pacific Islanders with Disabilities of California in order to provide a face and a voice to AAPIs with disabilities. As an advocate at Disability Rights California and a member of the Asian American Pacific Islander Resources and Empowerment Employee Resource Group, I am dedicated to reaching out to AAPIs with disabilities and letting them know and connecting them with the services they need in order to succeed. With recent events in the news, my concern for my family will no longer allow me to stay silent. It's time for us to speak up and be invisible no more.
Ming Cheng Yang, South at-Large Director, California Association of the Deaf, Member Emeritus, Southern California Asian Deaf Association.
Everyone has their own experience about being oppressed as being an Asian person or being an Asian person with disabilities. In my experience, people accepted me as being deaf, but they did not accept me for being Asian. I have one experience I'd like to share. It happened while I was in college. I saw a flyer advertising for an event for a deaf Asian group at a buffet. I was very excited, and I decided to invite my friend, and she herself is white. When we got there at the buffet, I was very surprised and overwhelmed to see so many Asian deaf people there. I didn't meet them right away because I was very shy. So we decided to just eat together alone and observe the people around us. After we finished eating, someone from the group stood up to begin presenting. My friend tapped my shoulder and she asked, "Are you ready to go?" I said, "No, I'd like to stay. I still want to meet everyone." Unfortunately, she said, "Well, I'm bored. And what for? We don't need this group, this Asian deaf group. We have people out there. There's more deaf people out there." And I responded with shock and heartbreak. She rejected my identity and culture. I did not know how to confront her, because growing up, I learned it's not okay to talk back. So sadly, I went with her and left. Invisible, no more. My voice matters. I met Sharon Goff. I met her at a teaching credential program at CSUN. She welcomed me to join the Southern California Asian Deaf Association, SCADA. She helped me understand my identity and accept who I am. She's the first person who really listened and understood what I've been through, understood without judgment. And I am truly appreciative of her being a part of my life. SCADA helped me gain my confidence and stand up for what I believe in. To value my culture and identity. And for everyone out there, we educate about our culture, about our values and beliefs, so that we can gain respect and acceptance as equals.
Sharon N., Master of Arts.
Invisible no more. Born on silver pussy, and I was born to be a mom. Most people were against it, and I had to jump through many hoops for doctors that I can have a healthy pregnancy. After the birth of my daughter, doctors and nurses tried to take her away due to my disability. I fought hard as I had to in all areas of my life that I can be a parent, regardless of a disability. There were many battles that I need to advocate for, to live without limitations and barriers. Instead of confronting each other's differences, let's get to know one another's, her story and his story. Hashtag we can and will. Let's do it for our kids. My voice matters.
My family matters.
Ida Moyahide, President, Southern California Asian Deaf Association.
I'm deaf. I moved here from the Philippines, where I grew up and attended a deaf school. Here in America, when I moved here, I went to a mainstream school with a deaf and hard of hearing program. There was a small classroom of deaf and hard of hearing kids, and I was mainstreamed in some other classes, with an interpreter. That day, I entered my first mainstream class, and I saw the interpreter, and I did not understand her sign language. And the reason was that she had these long, brightly colored neon nails that were very distracting and difficult to understand. I suffered with it for many weeks, and I wanted to let my homeroom teacher, I wanted to let her know about this interpreter. But growing up, I learned it was best not to make trouble and to accept my circumstances. So I continued with this interpreter. At a certain point, I couldn't accept it any longer. Her signing was not clear. So I went ahead and let my homeroom teacher know. About the interpreter, her sign language is not clear, her nails are way too long, and it's hard to understand. The teacher said, "Oh, well, you're new. You just moved from another country. This is your first time in a mainstream class. You'll get used to it." The teacher ignored me, and she ignored my needs. Invisible, no more. My voice matters. I entered college at CSUN, and I learned more and more about accessibility. I learned I could ask for an interpreter that fit my needs. Plus, I could change the interpreter to my preference. And the more deaf people I meet, we all learn our struggles, our experiences growing up in a mainstream school with less skilled interpreters. We learn how to stand up and speak up for ourselves. There are different services that can fit and accommodate our needs. Now I'm a teacher, and I teach the deaf and hard of hearing children, and I teach them about self-advocacy and that they should have 100% accessibility to information through an interpreter or other services that match their needs. It is important to teach children that their voice matters too.
Invisible, no more. Visible.
You've seen how their shared experiences are pretty powerful. Well, we ask you all to accept who we are, to embrace them, know and recognize them, and see them. Don't overlook us. See and accept us. I ask you to join us, work with us, and truly accept who and what we are. I want to thank those of you who've opened their hearts and shared their experiences with us. I want to thank the interpreters who voiced for us. I want to thank those of you working with us on this special project. You know, because the month of May is almost over, do we limit our support to this? No. I'm asking you to support us all of the time by going to events, celebrating, and joining them. To learn from them. To practice being a better ally.